Good morning. Everybody hear me? All right. Well, welcome to our annual hurricane heavy weather presentation. My name is Peter Bergeron. I'm head of security for Port Canaveral, and thanks everybody for coming. We do it every year, and we hope we never have to use it. So I'm going to knock on wood and hope we have no hurricanes this year. Maybe one to practice, and it goes into Tampa. Of course, the boss's house is there, so that's probably not a good wish. But so every time I get up here, I always think like, I'm going to introduce Santa Claus. Because if you know Corey's a big fan of hurricanes. I mean, before he became my director, he was the emergency manager director, and he lived, breathed hurricanes. And so we called him Hurricane Boy. So without further ado, I'd like to thank Corey first for putting us all together, and then introduce you. So Corey, it's all yours.
Thanks, Peter. I would have got some walk-up music like Rocky Like a Hurricane, but they said no. So thanks, like Peter said, thank you everybody for coming. This is great. This is probably one of the biggest turnouts we've had in a long time, which is good because the biggest thing when you don't have a storm that necessarily impacts you like we've been lucky the last 2 years, complacency starts to set in. So it's good to see the crowd here and coming here for this annual meeting, seeing if there is anything changed, anything that we need to learn. So one, appreciate that. So just going over quickly the agenda. Peter, thank you for the remarks. We're going to go through National Weather Service has put together a presentation for the upcoming hurricane season, some lessons learned, some things to expect, and we'll introduce him shortly. Then we'll have the Coast Guard come up and do their update to their heavy weather plan, any changes. And then we'll do a landside issues and notifications, which will be for Canaveral Fire Rescue, us as the Port Authority, and Brevard County Sheriff's Office. And then if there's any questions, we'll go ahead and open it up to the floor. And just for everyone's awareness, we like to have this presentation. COVID kind of helped us identify, things to learn, whether it's streaming or posting it. So this presentation is being recorded. So we'll have this posted after the meeting for everybody that couldn't make it, or so if you can reference it later when there is a potential storm. So with that, I'll pass it over to Cole with the National Weather Service. And again, he's going to give us a great briefing on the upcoming season. Cole.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Cole Failing with the National Weather Service in Melbourne. Just a little bit about me. I started at Melbourne in the beginning of 2021. I came from the Memphis office, and before that, I did almost 7 years in the Air National Guard, a weather technician, separated as a staff sergeant. Did some service in the Ohio National Guard, Tennessee National Guard, Air National Guard, Nebraska Air National Guard, and the 55th OSS at Offutt Air Force Base. And I also have some broadcasting experience, which I did for about a year right out of college, and then I decided to pursue a different career path with the National Weather Service, which is what brought me here. So a little bit about the National Weather Service. This is around the United States, and even actually some of our territories. We have offices such as like Puerto Rico, Guam, obviously Hawaii, and we have a few offices in Alaska. There's 122 offices. The picture to the right, top right, is a picture of our office. We actually have our radar on site, which is pretty nice. Not every office gets to have their radar on site, which makes it easier to repair, especially for the technicians. And then the picture below is an older picture of our office, so it looks a little bit different than that, but that just gives you an idea. We have an open basically an open office concept, so that way we can communicate easier between each other. Most offices have about 16 to 17 meteorologists, or that's what we're supposed to have at full staff, but we also have other employees, such as technicians that fix the radar and other equipment, computer issues, stuff like that, and then admin issues, scheduling as well. So overall, there's usually about 22 of us altogether, and we are open 24/7. So we work holidays, we work all shifts. This is the meteorologist, that is, and then we have a few managers who don't do shift work, really. They work during the week, and then they'll fill in when we need them to as well. So here's a little bit about a day in the life of a meteorologist. Again, we work 24/7, 365 days a year. There's usually at least two, a lot of times 3 of us, especially during the wet season, and then during the week we have even more meteorologists as well, and especially when there's severe weather or hurricanes approaching, we'll usually have a pretty full house. So the forecast we put out 7 days out, and that's put out on weather.gov. We also work with a lot of government agencies. That's our main mission, is to support the public and different government agencies such as police, military, fire departments, all those type of things, emergency managers. We all work together as one team, basically, to keep the public safe. Also fire weather, especially out west, but even here in Florida, we have fire weather concerns when we get a lot of dry weather, as we actually saw recently, a period of dry weather, which can lead to sensitive fire conditions. And then aviation forecast, we put out aviation forecast every day as well for different airports such as the Orlando area, Daytona, Stewart. We have all kinds of, we have about 8 TAF sites across our central Florida. And then we keep records for climate data as well. And we collaborate again through 4 different agencies. So here's a little bit about how tropical cyclones develop. Well, first we'll need to go over the definition, which is a rotating organized system of clouds and thunderstorms that start over tropical or subtropical waters and has a closed circulation near the surface. So a lot of times our tropical systems develop off the west coast of Africa as what we call a tropical wave. And then if it strengthens, the waters are warm enough and conditions are just right, then it will then strengthen into what we call a tropical depression. And then after that, a tropical storm, which is 39 miles per hour or more and wind speeds sustained. And then if it continues to strengthen, if conditions are just right, it'll then be classified as a hurricane, which is category 1, 74 miles to 95 miles per hour. And then we go all the way to category 5, which is basically complete destruction, and that is 157 miles per hour or more. And not all hurricanes develop in this area. This is just where a lot of them tend to originate. And it's important to focus on not actually just the hurricane rating, but also the impacts themselves and the hazards that are associated with hurricanes and tropical systems. So as far as hurricane season goes, well, we meteorologists and climatologists picked June 1st to November 30th because climatologically speaking, that's when our peak time is, where we see the most tropical disturbances and hurricanes develop. Actually, 97% of named storms occur during this period. 94% of all hurricanes, 89% of all tropical storms, but that doesn't mean that we won't see anything develop before or after this time. This is just when we should be most prepared and the best chance for tropical systems. And actually, speaking of that, this last year was the 7th consecutive year with a named storm forming before June 1st. And as far as the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, it was another record-breaking year as far as the number of storms, and 21 storms, the average is 14. We had 4 major hurricanes, 7 hurricanes, the average is 7, but we also had 5 rapidly intensifying storms, which is what we classify as strengthening by 30 knots or more in a 24-hour period. So those warm waters really help storms strengthen really fast. And we can thank the hurricane hunters. They did 58 hurricane eye wall passages and 462 flight hours. And we also had a lot of glider deployments, 66 of those. And we can also thank a lot of our better data collection for increased forecasting skill with our 15 NOAA weather satellites that we now have in operation. And last year also was the 6th consecutive above normal season. The previous record was 4, and that was from 1998 to 2001. And part of the getting better satellites and becoming better with data collection is we're able to get better with forecasting skill and with improved technology as well. So take a look at the 2003 cone. That is the purple cone here. This is what it used to look like, how big it would have been if we had the same scenario back in 2003. Now in 2022, this is how small the cone is, the cone of uncertainty, that is. And this is giving a projection of where the center of the storm may move or is expected to move within this cone of uncertainty. So within the past 2 decades, a 2-day forecast is now as accurate as a 1-day forecast was, and a 5-day forecast is now as accurate as a 3-day forecast. That was a 3-day forecast 1 decade ago. And so in 2021, again, it was another record-breaking year. We had the 3rd most active season on record. It was also the 3rd time exhausting the main list of names. We did that in 2005 and 2020. And we had 6 Gulf Coast landfalls. The Gulf has been very busy over recent years. 2 Atlantic landfalls. It was the 7th consecutive year where a tropical storm or subtropical storm has developed before June 1st. So as far as this year's outlook, again, sea surface temperatures in the tropical Atlantic are currently near normal and are likely to be at or just above normal through the hurricane season. Climate signals favor the continuation of a La Nina this summer and fall. That means the suppression of wind shear is likely, which that is creates a favorable conditions for hurricanes, because wind shear will help tear apart a hurricane. So the low wind shear that we have and that we project means it's more favorable conditions for hurricanes to develop. So we're expecting another above average season. However, we're not expecting a historic level of hurricane activity like we experienced in 2020 is not anticipated. But that doesn't mean that we won't get hurricanes here or anywhere else, because an active Atlantic hurricane season does not necessarily mean it will be an active just within Florida, and vice versa. The outlook is not a landfall forecast. So preparation is key, because you never know when your area could be hit. So it's important to plan now. So as far as the 2022 outlook, NOAA predicts 14 to 21 named storms. The average is 14. 7 hurricanes. The average is 6 to 10. So a 65% chance above normal, and only a 10% chance of a below normal season. And here's a look at the names that we will go through this year, if we go through them all. The first name will be Alex, which we're watching, obviously, I'm sure many know, tropical system off the Yucatan Peninsula currently, so we'll see if that ends up turning into Alex or not. And then if we go through the whole list, then it will go to Walter. So there's 4 types of impacts. Everybody's familiar with winds, obviously flooding, but storm surge is actually one of the most impactful and problematic parts of a hurricane, and accounts for about 50% of deaths. And tornadoes as well are also another concern, especially with just the way that a hurricane rotates. It's more conducive for tornadoes to develop. So, when it comes to winds, it's important not to focus just on the cone itself, because here's an example from Irma. You'll see how damaging winds really reached a very wide swath, all the way from the Treasure Coast Airport. Had a gust of 89 miles per hour, and then you'll see in Orlando 79, Cape Canaveral 81. So the winds were widespread. It doesn't mean that just one small area could be impacted. As far as storm surge goes, again, like I said, it accounts for about half of the deaths are associated with tropical storms and hurricanes in the U.S. Here's a look at what a nice weather day would be. You'll see you can enjoy a nice beach day at normal high tide, and areas above high tide are normally dry. But when a tropical system is approaching or storm surge is expected, the water will then be pushed above the normal coastline, and flood inundation will occur. Normally dry ground can be inundated as a result of storm surge. So that can push water into businesses, homes, and cause threats to life and property. So here's some pictures of what it looks like. You can notice it looks like complete destruction nearly with Hurricane Michael. This was Mexico Beach, Florida in October 2018. So you can imagine that would be nearly impossible to survive. In Hurricane Irma in 2017, here's a look at Melbourne Beach area and Daytona Beach, Satellite Beach there on the right, and Fort Pierce, just to look at what storm surge can do, even if you aren't directly hit by the hurricane itself, or the eye of the hurricane, I should say. But also flooding rain is a big concern as well. You'll see here with Hurricane Irma and Tropical Storm Faye. On the left is Hurricane Irma 3-day rainfall at Fort Pierce, got 21.66 inches, but Hurricane Irma was known to be a very destructive hurricane well ahead of landfall, but if you just heard on the right, Tropical Storm Faye approaching the area, you may not think much of it, but take a look. Melbourne got 27.65 inches of rain with a tropical system. So again, it's important not to focus on just the category size, because the category only, the Saffir-Simpson scale only accounts for the wind speeds. It doesn't account for storm surge, flooding rains and stuff like that. So tropical systems, just a tropical storm can produce as much damage or threat to life and property as even a Category 5 in some instances, depending on how it hits as well, and how big the hurricane is itself. So here's a look at where tornado impacts could be. Normally in the right front quadrant, Hurricane Irma here, you'll see where it's outlined tornado threat to the northeast side, where the strongest convection is, rain bands are as well. You'll see pictures on the right side here of some damage that tornadoes did. So again, there's a lot of impacts that come with hurricanes. So here's a look at Category 5 landfalls over the past I believe in history in our 1935. Rapid intensification is really happening right before landfall. Sorry about that. Back in 2018, Michael rapidly intensified right before landfall, and so sometimes hurricanes can catch you off guard, especially a lot of these hurricanes intensified within 3 days of landfall. They were a tropical storm, and then they all of a sudden were a Category 5 hurricane making landfall, like what Michael happened in 2018. So it's important to also pay attention to any system that develops and may be headed your way, because it could intensify very fast, and at one moment a few days before you may be looking and see that it's just a tropical depression, and 2 or 3 days later it's a Category 5. So especially if they get into the warm Gulf waters, they tend to rapidly intensify, especially right up into landfall. And actually the past 5, all the Category 5 hurricanes that have made landfall in the U.S. have rapidly intensified right before landfall. So roughly 90% of tropical cyclone fatalities are water related. 49% with storm surge, 27% with rain. A lot of people may think of the wind, because that's what the Saffir-Simpson scale kind of tells you, because we categorize it by wind. So a lot of people will pay attention to the wind, but 8% of deaths actually occur from wind. So it's important to pay attention to the flooding and the surge associated, but also don't discount tornadoes and surf issues as well. And even other issues such as carbon monoxide poisoning, or actually here's some other longer term impacts as more studies come out from longer term impacts from catastrophic hurricanes. Most frequent factors are cardiovascular issues, loss of electricity, leading to health issues and other health concerns, vehicle accidents, and evacuation issues. So how will we know when things are getting bad? Well, here's a look at the hurricane impact timeline. 5 days before landfall, that's where we are actually right now with our current tropical system that we're watching. Right now we have a tropical weather outlook for that. As I'm sure you've seen, we have a 70% chance of it turning into a tropical system. So that's the point we're at right now. Then 48 hours before landfall, that's when a watch would be issued if needed, such as a hurricane watch, tropical storm, storm surge watch. And then 36 hours before landfall, that's when a warning. So that means that we're actually expecting those conditions to happen for your area if your area is under a warning. So such as a hurricane warning, tropical storm warning. And then within a few hours of landfall, that's when we'll do more routine products such as a tornado or flash flood warnings. But we also have a less routine product and a rare instance, extreme wind warning. which would only occur if your area is going to be impacted by a Category 3 or higher hurricane, and that's when the strongest parts of the storm are expected to occur. And then even after landfall, there's still effects such as tornado, flash flood warnings that we issue as well. So here's the difference between watch and warning. Hopefully everyone knows that warnings basically mean that it is expecting to occur, and a watch means that it may occur, that ingredients are all there, and that it's possible that stuff could happen. So when it comes to a tropical storm, with the warning, tropical storm conditions are expected within the next 36 hours. So sustained winds of 39 to 73 miles per hour. And a watch means that tropical storm conditions are possible within the next 48 hours. And similar with the hurricane warning, hurricane conditions are expected within the next 36 hours. Hurricane watch, hurricane conditions are possible within the next 48 hours. And with the storm surge warning, there is danger of a life-threatening inundation from rising water moving inland from the shoreline generally within 36 hours, promptly following evacuation and other instructions from local officials. And then the storm surge watch, that's when there's a possibility of a threatening storm surge from rising water moving inland from the shoreline, generally within 48 hours. And that's when you should be preparing and expecting storm surge to possibly occur, but hopefully it won't, but you should prepare for the worst case scenario. So here's a little bit more about the extreme wind warning, because it is a relatively newer product. It's when extreme hurricane winds are imminent or happening. So this is when you should really be hunkering down, take it as serious as you would a tornado warning, because this is when you may have been under a hurricane warning for hours and hours, but this is the time to really get hunker down, because this is when the worst part of the hurricane is expected if it's a Category 3 or higher, because the sustained winds have to be 115 miles per hour or greater when we issue an extreme wind warning. So here's a look at how you can look at our localized threats and impacts on our website, weather.gov/Melbourne. You can place your mouse over this map, and it will provide specific impacts in text, and it'll show the potential and most likely. You'll see right here in this example with the pink means potential for wind greater than 110 miles an hour. And the hazard-based threat scale incorporates a safety margin relative to the uncertainty in the forecast. So the nice thing about this is that it also accounts for uncertainty and how likely things are to occur. So in the text, it'll talk about what should I be concerned about, where will it happen, how much is likely to occur, when should I expect it, and what should I prepare for. And impacts, and their statements are customized for the local area, topography, land use, infrastructure, etc. Preparing for a hurricane, you want to determine your risk, such as are we expecting storm surge, tornadoes, rip currents, strong winds, flooding, and rainfall. And a lot of that will depend on how the hurricane tracks, how large the hurricane is. Sometimes it won't even matter what the category of the hurricane is. If it's a large tropical storm system, like what we saw with Superstorm Sandy, you'll see that even those large systems can cause just as much destruction as sometimes a major hurricane can. So again, if you're in the path of where tornadoes are, storm surge, it's important to determine your risk ahead of time. Encouraged to get insurance checkups to make sure everything is good to go. Consider flood insurance and keep your documents with you. Obviously assemble disaster supplies as well, food and water, medication, gas, and then strengthen your home as well. Cover windows, secure loose outdoor items, all those type of things. But again, it's important to do this ahead of peak hurricane season, so that way you're well prepared, especially because now, as word gets out that the tropics are heating up, that's when supplies are going to be scarce and harder to get, and it's going to be harder to prepare, especially under stress as well. And develop an evacuation plan. So after the storm, there's still threats such as power outages. When there's a power outage, we encourage you to use flashlights not candles to avoid sparking a fire. Also, recent studies have shown that actual carbon monoxide poisoning is a much bigger issue than we may have thought for a while, and may actually cause more deaths in some instances in the hurricane itself after the fact, weeks, months, even years after the hurricane hits, depending on how long cleanup takes, and how, such as from generators, those can cause carbon monoxide poisoning. We encourage you to use them outdoors, at least 20 feet away from doors and windows. And also be careful with food and water. It can get spoiled as little as 4 hours in a refrigerator. And drink bottled or boiled water only, because purification systems may not be working. Also, for cleaning up safety, don't push yourself. Straining the body can lead to heart attacks and other serious issues. Be careful with chainsaws and stay safe. Use your heat safety. All this sounds obvious, but a lot of times when you're under stress or trying to help people in stressful situations, you may not be thinking of other things that may seem obvious beforehand. So where to get information? You can go to hurricanes.gov. It's a great resource, especially when it's we're just looking where tropical systems may be forming or where we're paying attention to certain areas. It'll show areas of concern, tracks, if a track has been put out, and if we're expecting formation over the next 48 hours or 5 days. And then on our own local website, our Melbourne forecasting office, weather.gov/Melbourne. This is where you can get more localized impacts and outlooks. That map that I was showing you earlier, where you can see the different probabilities and potential for certain wind speeds if that's expected. And then we also are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We also have YouTube at NWS Melbourne. We put out important information on there as well. So in summary, hopefully everybody has a better idea of how hurricanes develop, how we collect data, and how that's actually led to improved technology and forecasting skill, which you've seen with the Conan's uncertainty. We've really been able to narrow that down, which really helps with preparing and keeping people safe. The hurricane impacts and how to prepare for a hurricane, as well as tips for after a hurricane. Thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Appreciate the information. Thank you. A lot of good information. Thank you again, Cole. Two things that, you know, obviously picking up in that was you know, rapid intensification of a storm. I came from the EOC, and we do it here. You always plan for one storm higher when you're planning for those prep actions for that rapid intensification. And then one other thing, too, you talk about the watch and warning. I know that's always confusing to some people. I saw something on an emergency management blog on LinkedIn, and it was a great analogy. It said, for a watch, we have all the ingredients to make tacos tonight. For a warning, we're eating tacos tonight. And something so simple, it was great. It's easier to understand. So something like that, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, emergency managers, we're all getting together to try to identify ways of better communicating preparedness information. So with that, I'll pass it over to the Coast Guard and Lieutenant Hill as I get his presentation ready. No, that's not. Yeah, that's it. If you want to use this, if you want to walk, or if you want to stay, you can hit to the right.
All right. Hey, good morning. On behalf of Captain Vaughn in Sector Jacksonville, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Lieutenant Joel Hill. I've been the Sector Jacksonville Heavy Weather Officer for the last 3 years since 2019. So in the room, I also have Lieutenant Commander Anna Dixon, who is our Emergency Management Chief, and I also have MSD support with Lieutenant Commander John Danino. You all probably know him. So I'm going to go through this. One of the major changes that you're going to see is this is the 2022 to 2024 Port Heavy Weather Plan. So the big change, Coast Guard wise, what we need to do is we need to review all of our instructions and plans every year. What we've done at Jacksonville is we've repromulgated this instruction based on the input every year in addition to the review. I would say that over the last 3 years, we've probably made some major improvements to this heavy weather plan. But what we found over the last, when I did an in-depth look at it, starting in December, really to get that out in March, was that we could probably extend this for a 3-year period and just continue to do annual reviews. So the heavy weather plan scope, really what this is going to do is this is not only going to guide what we do as the Coast Guard, and so you'll see in chapters 1 and 2 of the heavy weather plan, that's really going to talk more as to the general information, a lot of the stuff that National Weather Service just discussed, but then really into chapter 3, that's what the Coast Guard's going to do, and then in chapter 4, how that impacts the port. So you can see here our area of responsibility, why this impacts really Canaveral, and one of the things I want to hit on is our area of responsibility extends all the way down to Malabar. So from Crooked Creek all the way up in Georgia, all the way down to Malabar. The point of emphasis on that is going to be that really what we've done in the last 2 to 3 years is, and this is something that Corey and I were talking about, is because our AOR is so big, we really see this as a North AOR, really with a split into a South AOR. And so really understanding the fact that just because something's happening up in Jacksonville, like we've seen in the last couple of years with Elsa and Ada, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have impacts down here in Canaveral. And how can we minimize the impacts really to commerce? And that's what I'm sure everyone's thinking about within the port. How can we minimize that? Because just because we set, say, port condition, whatever up in Jacksonville, doesn't necessarily mean that we have to down here in Canaveral. We talked a little bit about unit hurricane conditions and port conditions, what our unit personnel preparedness are going to be, our port preparedness, and then what our pre-storm and post-storm actions and operations are. If you ever want to know what the Coast Guard's going to do, that last bullet with pre-storm and post-storm, if you look at Annex M of the heavy weather plan, that's going to be our pre-approved, captain signed, pre-storm and post-storm incident action plan. So really what we're going to be looking to accomplish, all the 204s are in there, and you can see where our point of emphasis is going to be. So accessing the heavy weather plan, when I initially uploaded the one this year, I did it under my own login. So anybody that was logged into Homeport could see it. But then I went back in and re-uploaded it. Thanks for the input. And so hopefully everybody can get to it. If you've never been to Coast Guard Homeport, really there's a sector directory and a port directory. If you go under the port directory and take a look at it, go under Sector Jacksonville. Down on the right-hand side, it's going to say contingency plans. You're going to see our area contingency plan. There's also going to be our port contingency plan, and that's where that's going to be. So port coordination teams, the real big point on this one, if you haven't sat on it, yesterday you probably saw some AWS alerts that went out. Mr. Doug Campbell sent those. There was one for our northern part of the AOR. There was also one for the southern part of the AOR. So if you didn't see one and you feel that you need to be part of that alert system, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is at the end of this, and I can put you in touch with Mr. Campbell and we can get you on that list. But really what that does is we're really relying on multiple agency and stakeholder teams, you can see that there, that are going to help guide what our response is going to be. So when we have these meetings, it's really putting the port stakeholders into a conference with the decision-making thought process within the sector and helping us craft what we need to do. So activates at the request of the captain of the port or the team members. If for whatever reason you feel that you need to know what the Coast Guard response is going to be, what our actions are going to be, what our projected impacts could be, feel free to reach out, request that. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll move in that direction. Ultimately, we're going to advise and recommend courses of action. So if you know that something's going to impact or you see that something, just because I'm up in Jacksonville, we're going to rely heavily on our local specialty knowledge down here in Canaveral and kind of get that information, but then also relying on these port coordination teams. Like I said, port preparedness, really chapter 4. If you want to know anything really specific to the port, it's going to be in chapter 4 and what we're looking at. So it outlines actions to be taken by the maritime interest. The point on this one is that really within the Sector Jacksonville AOR, within our captain of the port area as a whole, but specifically speaking here with Port Canaveral, there's really nowhere in the AOR that's suitable for refuge. So just take that into consideration when we're thinking about layup plans and remain in port requests. So port authorities and private terminal operators should direct vessels to depart during Yankee. And so what I will say, and you're going to see as we go through this in the next couple slides, as we talk port conditions, I would say that they're fluid. I wouldn't necessarily say that just because a storm is 96 or 72 or 48 hours out that we have to do these things, that there's going to be a lot of emphasis within the port coordination team that's going to say, this is what we should be doing based on what our pre-approved plan says. but using some critical thinking in how this could be, especially with the unknown. I think Dorian was a great example of that. That was the last time Sector Jacksonville stood up a full IMT. We sat in it for the better part of 10 days. As we moved through port conditions and unit hurricane conditions, that storm stalled, sped up, stayed offshore. Had we gone directly by this, there would have been no way we could have followed these hourly timelines to a T. And how it impacts and what the action are going to be required, all of this is in there. And really what it does is it follows pretty much what the National Weather Service is going to be doing. So myself as the heavy weather officer, whether that's being in contact with the National Weather Service up in Jacksonville, the National Weather Service down in Melbourne, getting that real-time feed on what the potential impacts are going to be and what those timelines look like, so the captain of the port can not impede commerce and we can make an actionable item on what we're going to do within these readiness conditions, whether that be for the port or for the unit. So the remaining port request requirements, this changed up a little bit last year. One of the things we talked about and that we did really well on this year is started reviewing the heavy weather plan in December, went through a command review, took all the input during the year, and was able to get that out by March 31st. What this really does is it allows us to put that out there with any changes that need to be addressed within the port. So for example, like with remain in port and with the layup, that can be accomplished if we set a May 1st deadline, but I don't have a plan out to you until June 1st, then how can you meet those deadlines that we've established within the plan? So that was one of those actionable items that we took early so that we could get that plan out. Remain in port is going to be required for foreign and domestic commercial ocean-going vessels and barges. Over 500 gross ton ITC, requests must be submitted within 12 hours of port condition whiskey. Vessels entering port after whiskey must submit prior to entering port, and vessels planning inbound and outbound transit prior to condition Zulu must still submit this remain in port request. So this year we have a little bit of continuity within our remain in port liaison officers, the RIPLOs that are stated there, Chief Warrant Officer Sanchez and Lieutenant Junior Grade Morales Rivera. Their contact information is there. You can also send a remain in port request if you have it. It's Annex H. It is a fillable form, so if you have access to the heavy weather plan, fill out that fillable form and send it either to them or to that distribution group there at jacksdomestic@uscg.mil. And then as far as layup vessels, we talked a little bit about that. Continuity there as well. Lieutenant Junior Grade Catherine Villasenor is going to remain the layup officer, so her information is down there at the bottom. Really on both sides, whether it's remain in port or for layup, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to those POCs to ask those questions, they'll be able to address anything that you have. One of the emphasis points that we made from last year was heavy weather shelter plans. So all U.S. flag vessels, 500 gross ton ITC with base operations that routinely originate from or within the Captain of the Port Jacksonville zone shall submit a heavy weather shelter plan by May 30th. May 31st being yesterday, we should have or have an understanding of what those are. If you need to do that, please submit those as soon as possible. Evacuation considerations. So talking about sheltering and within the area, Sector Jacksonville, within our AOR, having actual refuge. Evacuation considerations for the locks. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about land considerations, but 12 hours prior to 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds, the locks will stop operating, and the 401 lift bridges will stop operating at gale force winds. Post-storm assessments, so storm comes, hits, passes, then this is going to be one of the first things, like I said, Annex M of the heavy weather plan being our post-storm incident action plan. We're going to look to do our post-storm assessments. You can see what that's going to consist of, and hopefully get operations restarted in the port, really depending on what the impacts were from the storm. And I'll finish up with Coast Guard points of contact. Talked a little bit about who I am. I will be transferring this year. That's why you see Lieutenant Kyle Wyford coming from Coast Guard land area. A lot of background that he brings with him, so you'll be in good hands with the new heavy weather officer. His information is there. So he'll be here July 18th, and if you need anything from emergency management, as I introduced in the beginning, Lieutenant Commander Anna Dixon is here to support. So does anybody have any questions, or is there anything I didn't cover that might be important to cover while I'm here? All right, great. Thank you. Corey, appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Auntie. Thank you. Thanks again, LT. Appreciate it. All right, thank you, everybody. Again, thanks for coming. Hopefully, we're getting a lot of good information out there. So like Peter said, I'm the Director of Public Safety and Security for the port, and I do the emergency management program out here as well. So we're going to do our hurricane presentation, and we're going to talk about landside notifications. This presentation is basically the same as last year. We're not changing everything. Everything we're doing right now is going well. Again, we haven't had a storm specifically impact us in over 2 years. So right now, we don't need to change anything unless we've made those changes for COVID, which we've made a lot of those changes as far as being able to do things virtual. Anytime we have a storm, we get together, we have these hot washes with the tenants, we do it internally, we get our lessons learned, and then we make changes to our plan. So the next couple presentations are going to be myself, then we'll have Canaveral Fire Rescue, and we'll have Brevard County Sheriff's Office. And like the Coast Guard stated, we all work together, we operate under unified command, we make sure we have our plans, our preparedness actions, and our recovery actions together. So what are we doing right now? This is our planning preparation actions. Just like we're telling everybody we're having this meeting, this is what we're doing. We're starting our preparedness actions. The season started, we know peak season is in September. We want to make sure we're prepared prior to that peak season. So some of the things we're doing a monthly hazard of the port facilities. I'm driving around the port, I'm getting together with the tenants. I talk to Victory all the time, I talk to ASI, SpaceX. What is out there on the docks? What is out there that could be a potential missile debris? What is the storm going to pick up? What could be thrown in the water? So doing these hazard assessments, getting with our tenant relations, our real estate team, sending it out to the tenants and saying, hey, we see a significant amount of lumber. We see a lot of metal. We see debris. We see derelict vessels, working with all of our partners to make sure that we address these hazards. So when we do have a storm impact us, that does not become a cascading impact and make things worse. Pre-staging equipment and consumables. So we've learned in a lot of these prior storms is making sure that we have resources staged ahead of time for the event when the storm comes. Firefighting equipment, making sure, after 2017, after Matthew and Irma and 18, making sure that we have the right equipment in the event that we don't have water. Water gets shut off to the beachside areas, and if we have a catastrophic loss, how do we recover from that? So we've purchased firefighting equipment in the past, giving us the ability to pump out water to put out a fire to make sure that Seaport Canaveral can still go, making sure that we can run our cruise terminals in the event that we don't have a sprinkler system. So identifying those mitigation measures and having them ready for when the storm comes. Working with our purchasing department. Right now we're looking at food and water supplies, making sure we have enough. Looking at our port personnel, how many we have. What about our emergency contractors? Plussing up, making sure we have enough water, food, items to basically make that recovery, that initial 2 days, as comfortable as possible. So then we can get everybody back, we can get the port up and running, and then hopefully the businesses are back, and now we can get someone a hot meal. Pre-positioned survey vessels for damage assessment. This is something that we've been doing since 2017 and really effective since 2018. It's got us the ability to reopen the port in 24 hours with a great relationship with the Coast Guard, and obviously this great relationship that we have. Our engineering department has a contract with Land and Sea Survey. They pre-position a vessel, like we already talked about, pre-staging equipment. The minute that storm passes, they go out, they do a survey of the port, make sure it's open, there's no shoaling. The vessels can get in, the pilots, they agree on it, they go do an ATON assessment, the Coast Guard goes out there. All three of these bodies, including the port, we get together and we make that determination that everybody feels safe to get in. And we've been able to open up the port within 24 hours following one of these passing storms, which is significant. It gets commerce back up. It gets everybody back in as fast as possible. The commercial fleet positioning the barge canal. We heard Lieutenant Hill talk about it, going through the locks. This is something that we do. That Port Canaveral is not a safe haven. It's not a refuge for anyone, including vessels under 500 gross tons. And we'll talk about that later with the marinas. In the commercial fishing industry, the fleet goes in the barge canal. Ryan Moore's not here. Ryan Moore does a great job of organizing that. We know that's not a safe haven, but they go in there, they anchor off the trees, they stay out of the channel, they man their vessels, and they've been able to have successful each time we've had a passing storm, and it's gone really well. Recreational boats need to be removed from the water. This is something that changed last year, the Marine Air Evacuation Bill. It passed on 7/1/21. We had this discussion last year. Again, we didn't have to necessarily have a storm that made us enact this, but everybody knows it has passed that when we order an evacuation, These marinas, these vessel owners in the marinas know that they have to get their boats out of the water, and it has to be completed by the time of the evacuation, which would be about Yankee. And one thing like I want to say, we've had 2 years. Again, we haven't had this storm. This is the first year that it's been enacted for a full season, so we just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Coordination with CBP for cruise and cargo passengers, or cruise passengers and cargo vessels coming in. CBP is part of our unified command. We operate with the Canaveral Port Authority, Brevard County Sheriff's Office, Canaveral Fire Rescue, Coast Guard, and CBP. We work together when it's prep actions, talking about cruise vessels that are out there, how we're going to get personnel back. Same thing with cargo. When we're going to reopen, first is obviously we want to get fuel vessels back in, because when we have the public evacuate, we need to make sure that we get the gas stations and the airports. We need to make sure that fuel gets back. Then we're going to turn our focus to the cruise passengers. And pre-stage incident response equipment, making sure that we're ready for that recovery, whether it's the firefighting equipment, the land and sea survey, food and water. So our objectives, preparation for prior to landfall. We're going to do a phase closure of the port and businesses. We're going to talk with the Coast Guard. We're going to talk with Canaveral Fire Rescue, BCSO, the Brevard County EOC, who's talking to the National Weather Service. And we're going to get all this information, get together with Unified Command, those parties I talked about, and we're going to identify how we want to do this phase closure. And like Lieutenant Hill said last time, Dorian was a very specific example. If you were to try to follow the timeline exactly, we could have ordered that evacuation and been sitting for 2-3 days waiting. So we take all this information in. Each storm is treated specifically, individually as that storm. Unified Command, we make an agreement, we make that decision, but we, again, take in all the information to make that specific decision for that storm. That way we're not impacting operations. We don't want to close the port. We don't want to order an evacuation until we have to. I believe last year, was it Isaiah last year? We had an impact, but we didn't order any marina evacuations because we looked and we waited for the storm. We waited and there was no impact to operations. So we did not order that marina evacuation or evacuation of the port. That would have made vessel owners have to take their boats out of the water. So we make sure we get all the ample information that we have a good decision not to impact your operations. Continuous fuel deliveries. We're making sure the fuel vessels are coming in, especially when there's a storm. Those are the priority. Get them in before the storm, get them right back in after the storm. And then obviously a complete shutdown of Zulu. 12 hours prior to the storm, we're going to be in Zulu, and you're not operating without Coast Guard Captain of the Port approval. There's a ride-out team depending on the significant size of the storm. Canaveral Fire Rescue, BCSO, they remain out here. They will keep an eye on the port, let us know what's going on. For those of us that's not here, following the storm passing, they'll do a safety assessment, basically a windshield survey, drive through, make sure there's no life safety, down power lines, flooding, notify us that it's safe. Our damage assessment teams will come in, and then depending on where you fall on the critical return list is when you will be notified to come back in. And a majority of the people in this room, you're on critical return B or even A, that you're going to be the first group to call in to get your businesses up and running. And the resources mobilized to assist as needed. Do we need to call the EOC? Do we need to get additional resources here? When we had Irma and we lost water, you know, obviously we got the fire pump from Port Arthur, but we also called in, Chris, was it 6 tenders? 6 water tenders from neighboring counties to make sure that we had water tankers here in the event that we had to get Seaport up and running, because again, fuel was the priority. And 2, a roving fire watch with fire personnel inside the terminals and tankers on the outside in the event to get the cruise passengers back. Response to recovery after landfall, number one is clear the channel. Make sure the channel's open. Let's get resuming operations as fast as possible. That's why we have land and sea ready, the Coast Guard ready, the pilots ready. We get out there, we do a land survey, we do a sea survey, the harbor, and depending on the weather, we do the outer reach channel, which sometimes is something that's a little bit slower. But again, we've opened the port in 24 hours after the passing of a hurricane. We talked about fuel trucks, received the fuel ships, and cruise operations. So recovery considerations, this is my last slide. COVID-19, we know we're moving towards that endemic, but it still could impact response operations. In the past, we've seen that, you know, depending on warehouse space, logistics, supply chain, what could it impact? So we just have to make sure that we address that. In the past, it was slower response time for critical infrastructure repair by FP&L because they were short-staffed. So we need to address and make sure that we're ready for any potential COVID-19 impacts. The channel survey immediately when safe. When they can get out on the water, that's the first thing we're launching is that land and sea survey with Coast Guard personnel and the pilots to make sure we can get the port reopened. And restoring water, power, services as soon as possible. The devastating water we lost in 2018 made it significantly more difficult to reopen after Irma, so we've done a lot. working with the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center, working with Diane and her team and the state to make sure that Port Canaveral is identified as a critical infrastructure and we get priority status when at times when we need to restore following the passing of a storm. We know there's limited quantities of supplies and equipment, so we're pre-establishing those contracts now. We have contracts with emergency repair groups. Our engineering team has those. They've already been approved by the board. We start June 1st. They're ready to go. We have an emergency repair team, a general repair team, and they all go throughout the port with the port personnel. We have our contract for the land and sea survey to get the harbor surveyed so we can get up and running. We have these contracts ahead of time, so we're not trying to get these when a storm. They talked about it. It's, you know, when the storm hits up, everybody's trying to get these, so we make sure we have these approved ahead of time. Local and state mutual aid agreements, Canaveral Fire Rescue, BCSO, they have significant mutual aid agreements, as do we. And we, if we have to, we'll lean on the Emergency Operations Center for additional resources. We have a great relationship with them. But the biggest thing is to be independent, and that's what we are. We're independent as a port community, as the Canaveral Port Authority, as the tenants in here. We're going to rely on each other as a community first and foremost, because that's how you're supposed to operate, and that's how we're going to operate. And we make sure we're ready with these contracts. And again, like I just said right there, FEMA, you have to have local resiliency. FEMA is not coming in, the state is not coming in until you absolutely need them. And we want to make sure that we're self-reliant, self-sufficient, and it's shown over the last 3 years that we've done a great job being that way, and I appreciate everybody in the room for doing that. And I'm just going to finish with be proactive, not reactive, and it shows that you guys are proactive because this is the largest, I think I've seen it in the room as far as response, so I really appreciate it. And again, after 2 years of not having a storm, seeing a significant amount of people in here, I really appreciate that. And with that, I'll pass it over to Captain Jeff Crawley with Canaveral Fire Rescue. That's okay, you don't have to clap for me. And if there is questions, we got CFR and BCSO next, and we'll open it up after that.
How's everyone doing? Like you said, Jeff Crawley, Captain, Canaveral Fire Rescue. What I'm going to do here is everything's pretty short and sweet because how we operate is kind of nothing set in stone. We kind of just operate and go with the flow. But the things I'm going to go over now are pretty set in stone as far as how we're going to operate about 72 hours out. All right, pre-storm, 72 hours pre-landfall. We're going to prepare stations, apparatus, and equipment, open communications with Canaveral Port Authority. 48 hours before landfall, assign shift personnel to stations. So when we assign shift personnel, it's just, we'd like to keep one group at home with their families and keep 2 shifts on. So that way, if we have to work for 24 hours or what have you, we can rotate crews in and out. So we'll assign those 2 shifts prior to landfall, about 48 hours out. 24 hours pre-landfall, assist in general population if required, non-essential equipment evacuated to the mainlands. So we're just taking equipment and getting it out of here. Pre-storm, so 12 hours pre-landfall, stations are staffed, so those personnel that were assigned to the stations, we're actually going to staff them at the stations, and they're going to stay and ride out the storm if there's not an evacuation in place. So personnel vehicles, so when they come, they park their vehicles, we'll get them in place, and then we'll move all their vehicles to the cruise terminals for safety. Stations will be locked down when winds are at 45 miles an hour or above. So if we do have an evacuation, it's very important to the public to make sure you get out of here because once the winds hit above 45 miles per hour, we're not coming out. Post-storm begins when the winds fall below 45 miles per hour and preferably daylight. Obviously things change. We might not have a choice and have to go out at night, but we prefer the daylight. Staff 1 personnel in the IMOC to assist with communications between Canaveral Port Authority, Sheriff's Office, Coast Guard, and obviously ourselves, Canaveral Fire Rescue. Perform hazard assessments of Port Canaveral and then mitigate any hazards. So we'll go in like Corey was talking about, we'll go in, do our hazard assessment, and then they'll come in afterwards and start bringing their groups in. I think he said A and B group, like that. It's short, it's sweet. That's the only stuff we can really tell you that's how we operate exactly because everything changes. Everything's subject to change. A little more history in 2018 for Hurricane Michael, we sent 2 strike teams up there for a total of 16 days to assist in that. So that's also things we have to think about, and our crews have to get ready because we don't know if it doesn't hit here, it goes to the Panhandle, what have you. We still got to send groups to go, or crews to go help out with, you know, fighting fire, medical needs, and tarpon houses, tree removal, and things like that. Besides that, I don't have anything else. Any questions? All right.
Thanks, Jeff. And I did want to make a comment, and then I'll pass it over to Commander Keck with BCSO. One thing of confusion in the past is when there is a landside evacuation by the Brevard EOC, like it's where you guys live, that does not necessarily close Port Canaveral, the harbor. That does not coincide with the harbor. That will be a discussion with the Coast Guard, Captain of the Port, local Coast Guard. But if there is an evacuation, we're going to take that information in determining how to handle shoreside operations in the port, which would be potentially ordering a Port Canaveral evacuation. Again, landside, but that would affect removal of marina vessels. But I just want to let you know, if you see the Brevard EOC, there's an evacuation order that does not impede Port Canaveral marine operations. That is Coast Guard driven. And I'll pass it over to Commander Keck, Brevard County Sheriff's Office.
Hey, good morning, Byron Keck. I think I have 1 minute, so I'll get through this really quick. Like Canaveral Fire, a lot of our stuff is for us, what we do. Oh, okay. I was going to say, it's going to be real quick. Obviously, we'll designate somebody as a coordinator. In this change, it would probably more likely be Lieutenant Lockhart. Down there, I have a lieutenant with the city as well, because I kind of split my time between the city and the port. But of course, I'll be here through the duration of everything. We'll secure all of our stuff. Our MSOs will assist the CPA and any of the tenants with any particular things that they need throughout the port here to get ready. Our marine units will start doing active patrol. We have underwater survey as well on one of our boats. They typically go out and try to get sort of a baseline as far as the underwater, just so afterwards we can come back, see if there's any anomalies that maybe we need to check on. Of course, start attending emergency management meetings. We start our own internal plans. We start doing directed patrols of the secured areas. Marine units continue patrolling. We are AB staffing. What that means is we call all of our personnel in, and then we start doing like a 24/7. So basically, nobody has any days off. Everybody's working, and it's AB. So you have 12-hour shifts. Everybody's split between the two shifts. That's a decision that's made either by the sheriff or the chief deputy. Eventually, at 24 hours, our MSOs will kind of pull them in, and then we'll start replacing their duties with deputies. We'll start doing what they're responsibility for. We'll start getting our boats out of here, the ones that we're going to evacuate. Of course, Keith will take care of a couple of our boats there and make sure that they're safe at Blue Points. I know he'll give them priority, right, Keith? We'll get all of our stuff secured. Of course, storm landfall, our response is going to be determined basically by the condition and what the call is. Like Canaveral Fire said, there's going to be eventually that we won't respond. That's why when you hear the mandatory evacuation, you're kind of on your own at a point of no return there, because, you know, even if you get into trouble, we'll do our best. We'll come out if we can, but there's going to be certain times and certain things we're just not going to respond to. So, well, obviously, we'll man up a command post here. We're going to have a contingency at the IMOC and then also at the Canaveral precinct. That way, heaven forbid, if we were to get disconnected from the north side of the port due to an issue with the bridge or something, at least we'd have personnel on both sides. We coordinate our post-storm response, continue the meetings, traffic, and then I think this is it. But I was just going to talk real quick because some of the things here. Of course, one of the big questions, and Corey can appreciate this, it always comes up as far as the bridge closings. We don't close bridge prior to storm. So you can go landside anytime you want. We're not going to put somebody out there in the middle of a storm to close the bridge down. Now, we may capture the bridge post-storm just to do a quick assessment beachside to make sure the roads, make sure there's not power lines down, make sure there's not, you know, washouts and things like that. But we have taken a stance over the last few years. As soon as it is safe to do so, we open those bridges up and let people come back. We're not going to wait for every individual city to kind of say, okay, we're ready to go. And like in past, that's what happened. And it would be a big delay as far as getting people back. And obviously people want to get back to their homes or businesses. We know that and appreciate that. So we've made an agreement up with the cities. If Cocoa Beach has a certain area or Satellite Beach that they have issues, then we're going to work with them to kind of just cordon off that small issue and control that so that we can open up the bridges and get that back. I think in 2019 with that, what was that, Matthew? I forget, they all run together after a while. We closed the bridges post-storm. We had them back open with about like an hour. It was almost a record. And obviously that wasn't a terrible storm, but that's one thing. And I think that is it. And I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. And I'll have to get with maybe Corey and Peter. Just if it's been a couple of years, make sure that your point of contacts are updated as far as an Everbridge. Maybe we can do like a test or something like that. So if you've got some new personnel on that aren't included in that, because if a storm's approaching, we start putting those out. You want to make sure that your personnel that you need to have on there are on there so they're getting those updates. We talked about the bridges. If it's not already in your plan, especially for the tenants that have waterside facilities, Corey talked about, you have stuff like that. The last man or the last woman that leaves the facility when it was coming, if you can take pictures, take a quick video assessment, especially of anything waterside, that could be a big help coming back, to see maybe if you have something unaccounted for that we need to be looking for, so that's a good point. Okay. And then I think I just missed. Okay. And then, and then we also, Lieutenant is over the dive team, so we also have access to that. So post-storm, if we had an issue, if we had something under the water that we thought may be an issue and we needed to verify, then we've got a direct link to the dive team. We can get that out there. So, okay, thank you. That's it, unless anybody had any questions. Okay.
Appreciate it, Commander. Thanks, Commander. And like Commander Keck said, the bridges, they're going to control the bridges post-storm, but please do not respond back to Canaveral until you are notified by that critical return list, that Everbridge notification, because in the event that maybe the bridge is open but Port Canaveral is impacted, we need to make sure that it is safe for you to respond. So wait for that notification. If Darlene's already got all your information, if you think you need to be on one of those critical return lists and you haven't coordinated with Darlene, please see Darlene on the way out. But we do a phased response. A is that damage assessment. B is about 80% of everybody else. C is just the port's almost back to normal. So please wait for that notification. And with that's the end of the presentations. Again, thank you, everybody. This has been great. Stand by for any emails. Please check your areas for missile debris, and please stand by for any emails to address that. Thank you, everybody.